Hi there, this is Tanvir and this is my lab submission for lab 5, which is the PWM lab. So we know that our board is a 72 megahertz clock, and we divided by 720 to make it 100,000 hertz, so that we can have better numbers to calculate with. So ARR is the time period and CCR1 is the time high. And so for the first part, if we want a 10 millisecond period, then if we divide 10 millisecond by 10 microsecond, we get 1000 for the ARR value. And for a 50% duty, so 50% of 10 milliseconds is basically 5 milliseconds. So we're going to divide 5 milliseconds by 10 microseconds, which gives us 500. This is going to be our CCR1 value. So I have already loaded this thing to the board and it's running on Scopy. As we can see here on Scopy, for a period of 10 milliseconds, we're getting 50% of it high. That means 5 milliseconds of the time it's high and the other 5 milliseconds it's low. For the integration of the blue button, let me just uncomment this part. So what it says is if I press and hold the blue push button on the board, then it should change the duty cycle to 80%. So let me just load that to the board. And now on the Scopy, we can see that it's still at 50%, but the moment we press the blue button, it goes to 8 milliseconds, which is 80% of the 10 millisecond period. Now I'll go to the second part of the lab. So for the second part, we are required to do a 20 millisecond period with a 7.5% duty. So 7.5% of 20 comes to 1.5 milliseconds. So we'll be dividing 1.5 milliseconds by 10 microseconds. That gives us 150 for the CCR1 value. And as we want a period of 20 milliseconds, we're just going to divide 20 by 10 microseconds. And then we get 2000, which is for the ARR value. So let me just load this code to the board. Then we reset here. As we can see here, that for a period of 20 milliseconds, it's only high for 1.5 microseconds over here, which is basically 7.5% of 20 milliseconds. And now in my code, if I just uncomment this part, then we can see that as long as I'll keep pressing the blue push button on the board, the duty cycle should change to 5% from 7.5%, which should basically give us 1 microsecond of duty. Let me just load that to the board. And as we can see here, so in this code, otherwise it's gonna be on for 10% of the time. Okay, so you can see 10% of 20% is basically 2 microseconds. Sorry, 10% of 20 milliseconds is 2 milliseconds, so it's high. But when I press the button, it goes to 1 milliseconds. So that's all for my lab 5 for the PWM. Thank you.